You're on the couch. The TV's on, but it's just background noise. Your phone is in your hand and you're just casually strolling. But your mind is drifting over the day, not on anything specific. And for some reason, suddenly, you're hungry. But it's not time to eat. As a matter of fact, you may have just finished eating. Hot and crispy fried chicken, or a frosty carbonated beverage poured over ice into a chilled glass, or the silky sweet taste of the pink milk out of the bowl that you just ate the last marshmallowy bite from. And you haven't even thought about that cartoon character shaped sweet and crunchy cereal since 3rd grade. You get up, maybe check the fridge or order something. But wait, is that really your craving? It's there because someone put it there, deliberately, using a system that's been perfected over the last 100 years. It's so effective that most people don't even realize it's happening. And today, that system isn't just selling you delicious chicken or salty and crispy chips. It's selling you a car that can go off-road. Wait, when was the last time you needed to go off-road? Once you see how it works, you're going to feel a little bit different about what you see afterward. Although, just knowing about it may not be enough to resist its power. Let's take a peek behind the curtain and see this how it started. What? We're getting to the story. Squatch, we just ate. His name was Edward Bernays, and not many people know who he is, but his work affects us to this day. Edward Louis Bernays was born in Vienna in 1891. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. He grew up with a front row seat to the most revolutionary ideas about human psychology ever developed. His uncle had spent a career mapping the unconscious mind, the hidden drives, desires, and fears that move people unconsciously. Bernays read everything Freud wrote. His motivation was different than his uncle's, though. Instead of asking, how do we understand why people do what they do? He looked at it more in the way of, how do we use that to make people do what we want? In 1928, Bernays published a book called Propaganda. This book was an instruction manual of subversive influence. He wrote it in his own words, published openly. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. He called the people that did this work the invisible government. He later renamed his book Public Relations, 2 words specifically chosen to make the manipulation of public opinion sound benign. It was an understatement. It was a system, and Bernays proved it worked, over and over again, with campaigns that permanently changed American behavior. 3 of them are worth identifying, because once you know how they work, you'll recognize the same pattern everywhere. History doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. Campaign 1, bacon and eggs. In the 1920s, Americans ate light breakfasts, coffee, toast, maybe a little cereal. This was a big problem for the Beechnut Packing Company, which had more bacon than it could sell. They hired Bernays. He didn't run an ad. Instead, he asked his firm's in-house physician a question. Is a heavy breakfast better for you than a light one? Well, the doctor said, yeah, more energy, better for the body. So Edward then had that doctor write to 5,000 physicians across America, asking them to confirm it. About 4,500 wrote back. They agreed. Then he sent those results to the newspapers across the country. The headlines read, 4,500 physicians urge Americans to eat heavy breakfasts to improve their health. The articles helpfully noted that there was no heartier breakfast than bacon and eggs. He didn't sell bacon. He used the authority of science to manufacture a consensus and then let the consensus sell it for him. The habits of an entire culture shaped by a small group. It sounds familiar to me. Today, nearly a century later, 70% of bacon consumed in America is eaten at breakfast. Not because we chose it, but because somebody decided it should be that way. So now, you've probably heard that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. That came from Ed's playbook, the 1944 radio cereal ad. Me too, buddy. Campaign 2, Torches of Freedom. In 1929, women smoking in public was considered taboo. The American Tobacco Company wanted to change that. Their purpose wasn't about women's rights or freedoms. Instead, it was because they wanted to double their market share. So they hired Bernays. Ed consulted a psychoanalyst named A.A. Brill, who told him that cigarettes represented, in the language of Freudian psychology, a symbol of masculine power, a torch of freedom. So Bernays hired a group of debutantes to march in the 1929 New York Easter Parade. They publicly lit their cigarettes and called them their torches of freedom. He tipped off the press in advance. The story ran in newspapers across America. He didn't sell cigarettes. He attached the cigarettes to freedom and expression, and let the cause sell the cigarettes for them. The taboo disintegrated. Women's smoking rates climbed sharply over the years that followed. Later, he expressed regret, but I think he kept the contract. Campaign 3, Guatemala. Ever hear the term Banana Republic? This next story is a prime example. In the early 1950s, Bernays was hired by the United Fruit Company, now known as Chiquita, which owned enormous banana plantations in Guatemala. The legally elected president of Guatemala, Jacobo Arbenz, had proposed land reform, which would redistribute unused land to the local farmers. United Fruit Company stood to lose significant acreage. Bernays ran a campaign branding Arbenz as a communist threat in Central America. He placed stories in major American newspapers and organized press trips to Guatemala for journalists. The result was a manufactured consensus that intervention was necessary. In 1954, the CIA, armed with the narrative Bernays had engineered, pulled the strings behind a coup that toppled the legally elected government. Two parallel influence campaigns, one by Bernays shaping what Americans believed, and one by the CIA shaping what happened on the ground. Different targets, same playbook. Bernays never got his hands dirty. His method was more effective. He just influenced what people believed. Yep. They just repeated the story until it became true. And that technique is still used today. These are not the bananas you're looking for. Bernays lived to be 103 years old, long enough to watch his machine absorb into every advertising agency, political campaign, and corporate communications department in the US. The purpose for buying things was quietly changed from necessity to status. The techniques moved from print to radio to television, then into your living room, your bedroom, and eventually into a device you carry in your pocket every day. It started with outside voices slowly and repetitively convincing the crowd, then progressed to the most trusted device you own, quietly leading you toward decisions you think are your own. The device shows you specific content that influences perspective, shapes your emotions, and inspires action, all without you ever knowing. The greatest sleight of hand is that you believe your opinions are yours. Bernays worked with blunt instruments, newspapers, headlines, staged events, expert endorsements. He reached millions of people, but all with the same message. The architects of the modern attention economy built something different, more personal. They built a system that learns what triggers you specifically, what makes you pause, click, feel inadequate or validated, and then serves you more of it continuously. In 2021, internal documents released by a whistleblower suggested Facebook's own researchers had found the platform was causing harm, particularly to teenage girls. The research had been reviewed internally. Allegedly, they knew. The algorithm continued to run. Bernays reached everyone broadly. Silicon Valley made it personal. You'll see. The most sophisticated application of this system isn't selling you breakfast. It's selling you beliefs. Outrage that arrives on schedule. Causes that feel urgent and deeply personal, but were carefully escalated through a feed designed to provoke reaction. The question worth sitting with isn't whether your beliefs are right or wrong. It's whether you actually believe them or whether they were fed to you, incrementally, by the device in your pocket that you trust, perhaps even more than your closest friends. Ask yourself, do I really hate this person? Or am I basing my feelings on content that was fed to me? The question is uncomfortable. It should be. Because you might find the answer unsettling. What Bernays built by consensus and Silicon Valley runs by algorithm, someone actually sat down and codified. Chase Hughes has studied the science of human influence at a level most people never encounter. He documented the levers, naming them, and then publishing them in multiple forms, each written from a different perspective, so the reader can choose the angle that opens the door for them. The Ellipsis Manual, 6-Minute X-Ray, and the Behavior Ops Manual. These are basically field guides written so that anyone willing to read them can understand exactly how the machine works. That knowledge cuts both ways. The manipulation affecting you can be recognized, named, and resisted, but it requires very intentional effort. What Hughes identified, and what Bernays knew intuitively, is that human beings have a small set of core psychological drivers that, when activated, override rational decision-making. Social proof, scarcity, authority, reciprocity, consistency, the desire to belong. Consider every ad you've ever responded to, every impulse purchase you've ever made, and every subscription you signed up for because of a trial period. You weren't shopping or even looking for it, but there it was, 3 times in a week, on 3 different feeds, and suddenly you needed it. You were led into a trap, specifically designed for you. Now, consider this. Siri and Alexa, listen for a wake word. The microphone is always on in your pocket, the kitchen, and even the bedroom. Now, I'm not accusing anybody of anything. However, the opportunity does exist. The technology is already there. And the commercial incentive to know what you talk about before you search for it is worth billions. Somebody could benefit enormously. Don't worry. If you Google, "Is my phone listening to me?" they say no. Chase didn't invent the levers, he just wrote them down. And here's what matters for you. Understanding how this works is the first step to preventing it. The same behavioral science being used to sell you something can be used by you deliberately to pause, because the gap between the need and the action is where your power lives. Let's bring it back to the couch. The craving wasn't yours. That need came from influence. The timing was engineered, and the path from wanting to spending was designed to be as frictionless as possible. But friction can be your friend if you use the 24-hour rule. When you want something, purposely wait a day. It can give your actual judgment time to catch up to the manufactured urgency. The credit card makes it too easy. The impact to your money is veiled, and the website will graciously save your card information for your convenience. Squatch, every time you swipe without thinking, you fell for the trap again. What? Not again. That carefully engineered system planted the seed of need. And now you know the engineer's name. Apply it everywhere. The product you suddenly need, the politician you suddenly can't stand, the war that suddenly feels necessary. Remember how nuclear energy carried a deeply negative public perception for a generation? Now, data centers need power because the grid can't keep up. All of a sudden, the technology is clean, safe, and indispensable. The science didn't change overnight. The need did. And so did the narrative. That's not a coincidence. That is the system working exactly as designed. The question is simply, who decided it was time to change the story? And what did they stand to gain? There's an older question worth sitting with, one that the founders understood and military strategists have applied for centuries. What is the most effective way to conquer a people? Divide them. Two people understood this better than most. One was a strategist, one was a founding father. As far as I know, they never met. Sun Tzu wrote over 2,000 years ago in The Art of War, and he described the manipulator's playbook. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill. The power is in psychological tactics instead of force. Benjamin Franklin saw it from the other side. Standing in the middle of a revolution, he said, "We must all hang together, or we shall most assuredly hang separately." He knows a divided people was a conquered people. The playbook hasn't changed, but the tools have. So, the next time you feel strongly about a person, place, or thing, love or hate, passion or outrage, pause for a moment and ask yourself, do I really feel this? Or is this the result of a carefully planted and nurtured seed, tended by someone who benefits from your division? A person who thinks clearly is harder to manipulate. A family that thinks clearly is harder to divide. A community that knows its neighbors, that focuses on similarities instead of differences, is nearly impossible to control. The system doesn't fear your anger, it feeds on it. And what it cannot survive is our unity. A strong community gives manufactured division no soil to grow in. It's not idealism, it's the antidote. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And now, you have a responsibility to share what you've seen. Hit subscribe, because the next clue is coming. Share this with someone in your life who needs to hear it. And drop a comment. What's one thing you genuinely share with someone you're supposed to disagree with? Welcome to Clues Hidden in Plain Sight. I'll see you at the next clue. Say bye, Squatch.